and welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fan fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we do. So last week...
Yes, last week was the duel.
And Draco unsurprisingly double-crossed Harry.
Not surprised at all.
And Lucius showed up and broke and burned Harry's wand.
Yep.
So there's that.
I forgot he did that.
Bound him and then threw a subpar invisibility cloak over him because we know it's not the Hallows cloak. But at this point, when this was written, we did not know that.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty much everything that happened.
Oh, well, no.
No?
They went to...
Oh, yes, they went to the other gathering.
Yeah, so they took the hair from Harry to try to get to Voldemort.
Yes.
That happened.
Yes.
Ron came to the class with him, and he learned how to apparate.
All right, are you ready to read this week? Chapter 18.
Are we going to talk about our wine?
Oh, yeah, we should talk about our wine. We're drinking the blueberry again by Staggering Unicorn.
Which I do think we drank 2 weeks ago as well.
I'm like 100% sure that's what we drank 2 weeks ago.
But we're drinking new blueberry this week,
yes.
Not old blueberry, so it's less boozy.
Which is good because Katie has to drive herself home tonight.
Correct. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 18, Morsmordre. Salazar Snape stared at Harry longer than he should have, his black eyes wide beneath the haunting skull mask. Harry could hear his heart pounding in his ears in the eerie silence of the ruined chapel. At last, Salazar said in a tone Harry wasn't expecting, "What is he doing here?" There was a hint of panic in his voice. "Lucius," he whispered, "why do you have Harry Potter here?" Harry noted LaSalle's staff. It had gone from green to its usual blue. "I thought you could bring him to Voldemort tonight," Lucius explained. He was gripping Harry's arm tightly. "After he questioned your allegiance to him and asked you to show your loyalty by bringing Harry Potter to him, I thought of a wonderful plan to get the other Death Eaters on our side. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you rode up with Harry Potter and killed him before Lord Voldemort?" LaSalle started pacing. "After all, it's ridiculous how he goes on about this boy. And if you were able to do something about it in front of him that he hasn't been able to accomplish, it would make him very angry." LaSalle shot at Lucius. "And I don't think we're strong enough to take him on yet." It seemed Malfoy hadn't considered this. His fingers dug down into Harry's arm as he came to realize that his efforts weren't being accepted as he had hoped they'd been. "Then yes, we aren't ready yet, but then we can use the boy to buy time." Time? LaSalle stopped pacing, and his staff began to glow green. We know that's never a good sign.
No, never.
Lucius took this as an okay time to explain. "Voldemort's not going to give you much time. He suspects if you give him Potter, it would lessen some of his suspicion," Salazar finished. "And with the extra time, we could gain the support of the Lestranges and Pettigrew. You're never going to get the Lestranges on your side."
No, Bellatrix is far too crazy for that.
Maybe Pettigrew, because he'll just follow whoever he thinks the bigger person is.
Yes, Pettigrew probably, but the Lestranges, never. Mm-mm.
The white masks hid the expressions of Salazar and Lucius as they stood facing each other. The other Death Eaters were keeping their distance. Harry wished that he could see Salazar's face as he contemplated Lucius's words. "It seems for the best," Lucius said hopefully. Salazar nodded. "It would, and the Lestranges are valuable. I'd kill Pettigrew." Fair.
Yeah.
"Do you wish me to get the Death Eaters ready to ride then?" Salazar paused before nodding again. Lucius took this as the go-ahead and started to drag Harry with him. "Leave Potter with me. I'll watch him," Salazar said abruptly, and Lucius finally let go. "Don't worry, Harry," LaSalle said quietly as Malfoy and the Death Eaters headed out of the chapel to their mounts. I'm going to try to make best sure that nothing happens to you. Just do as I say, and you'll be taken care of. I'm going to try and stall as long as I can and give Dumbledore enough time so that by the time we arrive, Voldemort will already be dead. Harry had no choice but to put his trust in Professor LaSalle. All misgivings he had to be put aside, for there was nothing he could do, though what he saw next made trusting him a hard thing to do.
Well, of course it's going to be hard. Like, if he wasn't good at playing both sides, he wouldn't be alive still.
Correct.
Like, not that I'm defending Canon Snape, because Canon Snape is a horrible person, but, like, if he hadn't
Been so good at being horrible.
Yeah, he would have never survived as long as he had.
Correct. He would have been killed long before.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's, like, a horrible person, like, as it is. But, like, if he wasn't so good at it, he would have been dead a long time ago.
So long ago.
Yeah.
Lucius Malfoy came riding up on his gray mare, the reins to his horse in one hand and the reins to the other he was leading in his other hand. As soon as Harry noticed, however, the second animal was by no means a horse. It was black, so black that it seemed to draw in and squelch any light that touched his coat. It was clove-hoofed and had a lion's tail, much like a unicorn, only this animal was massive. Do unicorns' tails look like lion tails?
In some lore, they have lion's tails, or, like, you know, it's shaped like a lion's tail and they have cloven hooves.
Okay.
It just depends on the lore that you're reading.
All right. Cool. Mm. It was frothing and pawing at the ground, and when it tossed its great head, he saw what twisted out of its forehead was a very crooked horn. Ah, it's a dark unicorn.
Dun, dun, dun.
Salazar walked straight up to it, his staff glowing bright green, placed a hand on the unicorn's velvet nose. Hush, Camlin. You'll get to stretch your legs tonight. He spoke in a calming voice as he took the reins from Lucius and swung up into the saddle. Have Potter ride with you, he ordered Lucius before allowing the unicorn to charge out of the ruins. With a rough yank on his arm, Harry was helped back behind Malfoy. He held on firmly to the back of the saddle as Lucius Malfoy urged the mare after Salazar. They were an eerie sight, moving as a frightening herd across the countryside. The pounding of the hooves seemed to cause a small earthquake as they tore through the fields. Harnesses cracked and black capes whipped about in the wind. At one point, Harry was nearly thrown as they jumped a hedge, and he was forced to grab Lucius around the waist. Why don't we just apparate? Lucius had been riding close by Salazar's side. The Magnus mare he and Harry were riding didn't seem too pleased at the arrangement and kept throwing its head, trying to distance itself from the dark unicorn. They jumped a stone wall, landing on a paved road on the opposite side. Sparks flew from the hooves as the mares burst onto the road. Here, Salazar stopped. You're missing the finer points of being mounted on a Magnus mare, he replied. It's very intimidating. But who are we intimidating? Lucius asked. We're on our way to see the Dark Lord. That we are, but Lucius, my friend, I thought you would like it if we first had some fun. Salazar's mount squealed as it seemed ready to gallop off again, but was being tightly restrained. A bit of fun. These words caused a chill to run down Harry's back. A light then flashed down the road with a sickening feeling. Harry realized they were headlights heading in their direction. Ah, now here we go, Salazar said as he watched the approaching headlights. Lucius withdrew his wand. We've got some muggles, he yelled out, and excited whoops came from the party. Harry didn't want to see this. He didn't want to have to watch. He found himself tense and his hands aching as he gripped tighter to the back of the saddle. All the Death Eaters had drawn out their wands and lined up, blocking the road as a small silver car pulled to a stop. The stereo was blaring bagpipe music.
Bagpipe music.
I love a good bagpipe as much as the next girl, but only live.
Yeah.
Only in person do I want to hear bagpipes being played. The stereo was blaring bagpipe music. It was turned down when the window was rolled down. A young man with a head of fuzzy black hair stuck his head out the window. Oh no, Harry thought. God, no. He desperately wanted to warn them, to yell out, but the spell still had not yet been lifted from his voice. He had tried to lift it while still at Hogwarts, but didn't succeed. Now he tried in earnest again. Turn off the headlights, Dave. You're spooking the horses, a female voice said, with concern from within the car. The man switched to just parking lights. What are y'all doing? She's Southern. Or he is Southern. I don't think that's a Scottish thing.
I mean, they're in the Scottish countryside being tourists. Maybe they're just being touristy and listening to bagpipe music.
What are y'all doing? The man seemed American. A tourist.
I read ahead.
Maybe if I just kept reading. Is this some sort of odd Scottish holiday or something? The girl asked. Dave, ask them why they're dressed like that. I haven't read anything in the brochures about this. Would you mind telling us what you're all out here in that getup for? Maybe they're druids? The man turned back inside the car. No, dear, I don't think they're druids. Druids wear white. Then ask them who they are. Dave stuck his head back out the car window, but no sooner had he when the passenger side door opened. The woman, wearing a green sweater with "Freedom" written boldly across the front, got out of the car, a camera in one hand, and as soon as she did, Dave got out too. So who are you? I must say, y'all look very good, especially you, she said, pointing. With that staff thingy? No one had said a word as the Magnus Mare snorted and blew steam at the night air. The unicorn squealed again, making the woman notice of it. We're wizards, Lucia said at last. Wizards? Is that some sort of old religion like druids? The woman was now staring at the unicorn, her face becoming more serious as if she was attempting to figure out what she was seeing was real or not. Harry was still trying to get his voice back, but he knew he had to try to do something. He knew he probably looked horrible after the fight with Malfoy. His chin had been split when he hit the floor. Waving his hand, he attempted to get her attention. As soon as she looked at him, he could tell that she finally sensed something wasn't right. He pointed to the car and mouthed, "Get out! Get out of here! Get out!" Her eyes widened, and he knew she understood. Dave, on the other hand, Meg, give me your camera. I want to take a picture of this guy's horse that he has done up like a unicorn. It's the coolest thing. It's like it's right out of a movie. Dave, she whispered. Thanks. And Dave just took the camera from her hand and started to focus the lens on the unicorn. Good thing we got 800 speed film. Dave, Meg just said a little more urgently and pulled on his sleeve. What, dear? Just a minute. That boy, Dave. What boy? He was still focusing on the camera. The one that looks like he's just been beaten, she whispered softly. Uh-huh, what? He finally lowered the camera and spotted Harry, who repeated his silent warning. What the hell, Meg? He said after a moment. Why don't you get in the car? I'll figure out what's going on here. He turned angrily at Salazar. What's going on here? He demanded to know. Why is that young man with you all bruised up? All at once, the Death Eaters laughed. It was then that Harry was finally able to break the spell that had been keeping him silent. Get out of here! He screamed. They'll kill you! Get out of... Salazar's staff flashed, and Harry felt a cold sensation seize him, and his throat went numb. His vocal cords were made useless. But Harry's word had been enough to make the Muggle couple scramble to get in their car. One large Death Eater on the fat road pointed his wand at the car and then proceeded to cause the doors to lock and unlock in succession. Dave somehow managed to get in first while Meg was still pulling on the handle of her door. What's happening? She screamed. The Death Eater seemed to find this amusing and laughed while Meg cried and Dave tried unsuccessfully to get her inside of the car. After a while, he made up his mind to get out, but couldn't. Another Death Eater made the windows roll up, and Malfoy shot a spell at the hood of the car, making the engine stop and the lights go out. Then Lucius called out, Mobulus, and the car began to roll backwards. Meg continued to cry, pulling on the handle while the group of Death Eaters rode close at hand. They guided the car down the road, over a rise, and down a hill. At the bottom lay a pair of railroad tracks. The car was stopped just before the tracks. Malfoy and Salazar had stayed behind at the crest of the hill, so Harry got to see as they converged upon the couple. Harry could hear their spells and Meg's screams and wails, but all he saw were the horses and flowing black robes. How could Professor LaSalle let this continue? You want to join in on the festivities? Asked Malfoy, turning to Salazar. I'll hold Camlin for you. Salazar didn't respond. He just seemed to be staring intently on the horrid and cruel scene. You know you do, and some of the newer recruits want to see. What you and Lestrange did to those oars is legendary. Harry swore that he caught Salazar flinch. No, Lucius. But you're free to go. I'll watch Potter. Harry was struck at how much Salazar's voice suddenly sounded like Professor Snape's. Lucius hoisted his right leg over the mare's neck and slid out of saddle. I wouldn't dare try and run away from him, he snarled at Harry while handing the reins to Salazar. He then marched down off the hill, wand out. I'm sorry that you have to witness this, Harry, Salazar said quietly after Lucius had gone. But you must understand how important it is for us to buy time. The time that these muggles buy us will be the end of Voldemort. Realizing that Harry couldn't respond, he pointed his staff and Harry felt the feeling return to his throat. How could you? Harry finally asked, as soon as he felt confident his voice had returned. You're allowing people to be tortured in order to save many more from meeting the same fate. But it's still wrong. The whole scene before him was so sick that he could not see any excuse for it. The Death Eaters had set the Imperious Curse on Dave and were laughing as they ordered him to drive the car onto the tracks and park. He could hear Meg's desperate cries. Why are you doing this? And what about the oars? Did he mean the Longbottoms? Harry felt suddenly vicious. It's true then. You did torture them. It took a while for Salazar to respond. He had gone back to studying the stone in his staff, and Harry had become accustomed to him doing it. Only this time, there was a mask hiding his expression. Voldemort, Salazar began shakily, destroyed my life when he gave me this. It controls me. It rules over my life, and I can never be rid of it until I die. And my life wasn't the only one he's destroyed either. He ruined Severus's and most of my close mates from school. He killed so many. Your parents. He doesn't have to kill to take a life. He keeps taking away lives by binding them to him. I have lost all hope for Lucius Malfoy, and I am fast losing hope that his son can be saved. There's no telling how many lives would have been saved, be lived more fully if Voldemort had never existed. So you see, he must be destroyed at all costs. He needs to be killed. Salazar paused, and gripping his staff tighter, the stone growing to a brilliant, blinding green. That night he was stopped by you, I knew he was not truly finished. I can sense him, and I knew he was still alive, but weak. I had to find him and end it. Frank Longbottom and his wife were the first oars on the scene. Then they came with Severus. I figured if anyone knew where Voldemort had gone, it would be them. Frank was real good, top-notch oar. I was with the Lestranges, who were bent on finding Voldemort as well, though for other reasons. I had to get that information from the Longbottoms. Just had to, you see? Harry did see. He now saw Professor Salazar Snape for what he truly was. I do see. You hate Voldemort, he said slowly. You hate him so much that the hate has made you bloody mad, willing to torture and be just as cruel as him in order to reach your goal. It was so clear now. He no longer had to worry about Salazar's loyalties, for he knew where he lay. They were to himself and his festering hatred for Lord Voldemort. There was no response to Harry's remark, and they were left to listen to Meg's scream in the distance while the whistle of a train echoed in the still starry night sky. Dave, get out of the car! Oh God, get out of the car! What have you done to him? What have you done to my husband? Why? We never did anything wrong to you. Dave, there's a train. Dave! Morsmordre! Someone screamed, illuminating the sky with the skull and snake of the dark mark as the Death Eaters turned away, leaving Meg sobbing and screaming for her husband's life. The rumble of the train got closer. Do something, Harry pleaded. You've bought your time. Now do something. You can't just let this happen. But Salazar did nothing. Lucius approached, breathing heavily. He took the reins back from Salazar and climbed back into the saddle. As soon as his feet hit the stirrups, Lucius and Salazar turned their mounts and headed up the road, leaving the scene behind them, just as there was a terrific explosion.
This was a lot.
Well, that was heavy.
This was a very heavy chapter.
Holy crap. That was the heaviest chapter that we have by far read, and
Yeah.
a lot of people have already died.
Yeah.
That was heavy.
Wow. This story is so good, though.
So good.
It's so good. Well, I guess we'll just...
we're going to see you guys next week.
Yeah, we're going to leave it there. We'll see you next week. All right. See you guys next week.
See you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.